Welcome in, everybody. I'm Ricky Ransom, and that's Ralph, my dragon. They did it. They finally did it. Season 5 is the season of the Sorc, sorceress, sorcerer, whatever you want to call it. I call it sorceress because back in Diablo 2, when I was growing up, I played and the Sorc was my favorite class. Not only because it was speedy, you could just teleport wherever you wanted to go, but on top of that, it had one of the best meta builds in the entire game, the Blizzard Sorceress. She was great, but here's the thing. When I first saw the Frozen Orb Sorc, that's when I knew that I wanted this build to work. I wanted this skill to work. It was beautiful. It was glorious. The way it's shooting out everywhere, it explodes. It was just, especially like, you know, the graphics back then, there was just something about it. You could be mobile, you could shoot these frozen orbs in different directions, but they're spinning around and hitting everyone in the room, in the area. It was great. I loved it. And then Diablo 4 came out. The Sorc has been near the bottom of the tier list of classes since launch. Now, there have been a couple different versions or builds that have come up that worked well, like the lightning ball Sorc was decent for a while, but then they nerfed it. And you know, the Sorc has always just been near the bottom, but finally they made some significant changes to the sorceress build, or the sorceress class, Sorc, whatever you want to call it. I refer to it as sorceress. That's just me. What ended up happening is they changed the way that intelligence worked with their skill damage, and so it's scaled differently. So they're getting basically a 25% damage buff all around. And I'll put up an article here that shows the exact details of what they did, and it has made a pretty decent difference. Like last season, I played the Frozen Orb Sorc because that's when Fractured Winterglass came out. And Fractured Winterglass made it possible to finally start pumping enough damage through Frozen Orb to actually make this build viable. You have Frozen Orbs being cast by your conjurations, casting Frozen Orbs, and it's kind of just like this cycle that goes on and on. But it still didn't match up really when it came to like the upper tier. You know, you weren't pushing like crazy pits with it. But I still enjoyed it. I enjoyed playing the Frozen Orb Sorc. It's a fun build, and I just like visually how it plays and how it looks, everything. It's awesome. Don't get me wrong. Now, with this recent buff with Season 5, and I get it, Season 5, you know, we're past midpoint. We're towards the end, but either way, this is a build I've been working on all season, and I'm happy to have got it where it is now. Okay, let's go over the gear that I recommend, where we should put some of our masterworks and all that kind of stuff, GAs, all that, okay? Okay, while I was editing this video for the Frozen Orb Sorc, I noticed that I had not gone over the skills, and I needed to do that because that's kind of one of the most important things, but I want to make this short and sweet. So quickly, we're going to go over the skills, and I'm going to explain to you why we do what we do with this build, and maybe some of the different options if that's something that you're interested in, or like early game versus late game, because early game you might really be struggling with mana, so we don't want you to have to worry about that. So the first 2 skill points you're going to put into Firebolt because we use that as an enchantment. It doesn't really matter to put the second point in, you just have to put it in to unlock the next tier. Core skills, you're going to max out Frozen Orb. That's obviously your main damage dealing ability, so you want to max that out, and then you want to go into Enhanced Frozen Orb, and in late game you want to go into Greater Frozen Orb. Early game, if you're still struggling with mana, I do recommend going into Destructive Frozen Orb because you restore 5 mana when you're hitting a frozen enemy with Frozen Orb, so that can just like help you with your mana regen so you're not struggling as much. Next, we're going to go over to Devastation. We put 1 point in here just to unlock Elemental Dominance. You're going to max out Elemental Dominance. You're getting a bonus to your core skill damage whenever you cast a skill above 50 mana. Next, we come down here, and here's another one where you can deviate from the path. In the late game, once you have your Harlequin's Crest or your Shaco, whatever you want to call it, you'll unlock Flame Shield. You don't need to put a point into this, but some people like to have that emergency like break glass in case of emergency skill when you're leveling and when you're going through and you don't have your cooldowns to the point where you can just basically have ice armor up all the time. So you can do that if you feel like it, or if you feel like you're just too squishy, you don't have your cooldowns right. Otherwise, I wouldn't recommend putting a point in there because you get it for free with the Shaco, so you know why. Teleport, you're gonna put 1 point into teleport, enhanced teleport, and then go into shimmering teleport. This will actually help out a lot, especially once you get your cooldowns down, because shimmering teleport is granting 30% damage reduction for 4 seconds. And right now my cooldown is around, I probably have like 2 seconds where I don't have that extra 30% damage reduction up. And it also makes you unstoppable. Which one makes you, one of these makes you unstoppable, right? No, okay, you do become unstoppable. Okay, I might cut that out. Teleport makes you unstoppable. You also need that for your Tibalt's Will to grant the damage reduction you get from your Tibalt's Will, and on top of that to grant the bonus damage that you get from Tibalt's Will. Flame Shield can also grant unstoppable. I don't know if it says where, but like I think technically speaking, yeah. Characters cannot be damaged and are unstoppable with all crowd control impairing effects removed and prevented. So if you do put that point into Flame Shield and you use that, you can use that as a source of unstoppable as well. Next, we go down to Glass Cannon. You're gonna put 3 points out of 3 points into Glass Cannon, max that out. That's an important skill for just multiplicative damage. It's awesome. Ice Armor. You're gonna put 1 point into Ice Armor, 1 point into Enhanced Ice Armor, because this is gonna help with regeneration, your mana regen. And yeah, you just like Ice Armor is your main source of defense for the most part. So damage reduction, Ice Armor, Mana Shield / Barrier. Those are the 3 things that are really gonna keep you alive. Then you go into Shimmering Ice Armor. Ice Armor is active. You reduce its cooldown by 1 second for every 50 mana you spend. That's also important because you're spamming skills nonstop. You're going to be using 50 mana. It just helps your Ice Armor refresh as quick as possible. So I like that one a lot. This one is more of a extra point because we don't really have anywhere else to put it. With the new skill tree that's coming out in the patch, this will be different. You probably wouldn't waste a skill point here, but we'll just read it real quick. Critical strikes have a 7% chance to reset the cooldown of one of your defensive skills. Can only happen once every 10 seconds. So technically speaking, if you like, let's say you have Flame Shield and Teleport and Ice Armor, there's a percent chance that every time you critical strike, you can reset one of the cooldowns of those. So it is kind of nice to have, especially now, just because randomly all of a sudden you'll get Teleport back. All of a sudden you'll get Ice Armor back when maybe you had like 7 seconds left on the cooldown, whatever. Next, we go down here, we hit Precision Magic. This is another just like extra point, increase your lucky hit chance. You don't really need to put it in here. If you see more value putting it somewhere else, then you can put it somewhere else. But these ones are super important. Align the Elements is just to basically unlock Mana Shield, and you want to max out Mana Shield, you want to max out Protection. Mana Shield gives you, every time you spend 100 mana, you gain 30% damage reduction, and Protection gives you a barrier that is 30% of your max life for 3 seconds. So that's awesome. Then Conjuration Mastery. Obviously, we talked about this with the Fractured Winterglass. One of the most important things for this build, you're getting percent damage, percent movement speed, and mana regeneration for each active conjuration. So the more conjurations you get out, the more damage you're doing, the more movement speed you have, which in turn increases your critical strike chance. And then on top of that, you also are getting that mana regen that you really need, especially early in the game. So if you don't have a Fractured Winterglass and you're still trying to play this build, I would try to find an amulet that has Conjuration Mastery on it for sure. Next, you're gonna wanna put at least 1 point into Ice Blades, Enhanced Ice Blades, and Summoned Ice Blades, because this gives you 20% of the cooldown reduction applied to all of our other skills. So we just get our skills quicker. Cooldowns go down, it's great. Next, you're gonna go into Lightning Spear, Enhanced Lightning Spear, and then Invoked Lightning Spear. And this one just stuns enemies for 2 seconds. The other option is Summon Lightning Spear, and we don't do anything with Crackling Energy, so I don't recommend that. I just say go into Invoked, and then you get crowd control, and a lot of our damage scales with like crowd controlled enemies or frozen enemies or whatever. So that's a good one to go into. Next, we go down here, we hit Inner Flame. And this is our mastery skills portion, tree, whatever. Inner Flames, just to unlock Devouring Blaze, because with the Firebolt enchantment that we're gonna have, you're going to have enemies burning basically all the time. You deal 21% increased critical strike damage against burning enemies if they are crowd controlled, which most enemies should be with all the other things we have stacking. This bonus is increased to 30%. So that's nice. That's a good amount of damage. Next, we come down here to our ultimate skills, and we get max out permafrost, hoarfrost, and icy touch. All of these have to do with either chilled enemies or frozen enemies or vulnerable enemies. And all of the enemies that are around us are probably going to be all of those things at any given moment. So that's nice. Here's another one that you can use if you're struggling with mana regen. And the way that I recommend, because there's two of them, there's Fiery Surge, and I personally have tried this out multiple times with this build and with other Sorc builds. And what I've noticed is Fiery Surge seems to give you more bang for your buck, especially because there's burning enemies all around you. You're using the Firebolt's passive or enchantment, and so enemies are always burning. So you're killing burning enemies all the time, and the mana regen you get from this is pretty significant. The other one that a lot of people recommend, most people who have build guides out there will recommend just putting 3 points into Frigid Breeze. Here's the thing about Frigid Breeze. Cold damage against vulnerable enemies has a 20% chance to generate 5 mana. So it's like, first of all, it has to hit a vulnerable enemy. It's only cold damage that's inflicted to vulnerable enemies, and it still only has a 20% chance. Obviously, I think the percentage goes up, or maybe the amount of mana you get back goes up when you scale this. But I've tried it both times. What I recommend early game, put 2 points into Fiery Surge, put 1 point into Frigid Breeze, because Fiery Surge doesn't help you regen mana when you're fighting bosses. So this will help you give that mana, like get that mana regen that you need while you're fighting bosses. And then this helps with like all the crowds. Like you should never worry about mana if you put 2 in here and 1 in there. And you're already putting points into these ones, so it's not like a waste to unlock this one and put 1 point in there. Okay, we only got a couple more. Next, we have Unstable Currents and Prime Unstable Currents. We don't go into the last one because, well, once again, we don't use Crackling Energy. And this just increase your attack speed by 25% while active, which is super nice. Then this bottom one is another one, the key passive, that I really need to mess around with a little bit more. I don't know for sure. Avalanche has seemed to be working really well for me. So yeah, I would say just go into Avalanche, make it easy. I'll test out Verse Mastery, and if it's better, I will make an update. So yeah, there it is. Thank you so much. So the first thing we're gonna look at is the helm. Now I'm gonna provide a build guide down below that shows like a progression class. Like if you don't have your mythics yet and you're still progressing through the game, I will have a build down below that has mainly, I think it only has a couple uniques, mainly just legendaries and kind of the aspects you would want to go for. You're looking for things like anything that helps with mana regen and anything that helps with like attack speed, because usually it's like the more frozen orbs you can get out, the more mana you're going to generate. And so it just, you know, it's a cycle, it keeps going. So that's what we want to look for. But the build I'm showing you now is kind of like my end game where I'm at now. I do need to adjust some of the master workings. I just time wise, like it could take me an hour and a half to hit 3 times on cooldown reduction. I'm sure you know how it goes, but here we go. Harlequin Crest, or the Shaco as we know it. What you want to look for is obviously cooldown reduction. You want to hit all of your master workings on cooldown reduction. I recommend using rubies on all of your gear, but if you feel strong and you're not struggling with anything, you can throw some topazes in there, get the boost to intelligence. It really is personal preference, but yeah, try to hit that cooldown reduction. That's really what you want. But having the armor is nice too. Having a GA on armor has been super solid for me because I don't really have to search for armor anywhere else on my build, so that's nice. Next, we're at Tyraels. With Tyraels, we're getting our max resistances up, resistances to all elements up, and then damage reduction. The main thing we're really getting out of this is movement speed and damage reduction, because other than the fact that the Sorc can teleport, she isn't very mobile, and we get a boost to our critical strike chance the more movement speed we have. But with this piece in particular, with Tyrael's Might, I recommend trying to hit all of your masterworking on damage reduction. I need to totally re-roll this. Once again, time and just heartbreak. Time and heartbreak. That's should define it perfectly, right? Okay, next you want your gloves. Your gloves, number one thing you're looking for is Frozen Orb. You want Frozen Orb. Ideally, you want a GA to Frozen Orb. And Double ideally, you want a GA to attack speed and frozen orb. And then triple ideally, you want attack speed, crit strike chance, and frozen orb. So I got a double ideally. This is great. You want to hit all of your masterworkings on frozen orb. You want to get that as high as possible because that is going to be your main form of damage. On the tempers, you want to hit lucky hit. Really, with the lucky hit, it doesn't matter too much what you hit. I recommend either trying to get freeze or immobilize. Those are decent. They have higher percentage chances, and yeah, freeze, you're already chilling everything. So it kind of works with the build. And then the next one you want to go for critical strike damage, because we want to have our crit strike chance as close to 100 as possible, because we're really relying on critical strike damage to get the bulk of our damage from this. Next, you're gonna want a solid pair of Tibalt's Will. Ideally, you wanna find something with a GA to damage reduction while unstoppable. That's just gonna help your survivability, because the truth is this build and most Sorc builds are pretty squishy other than getting damage reduction and having your like ice armor and having mana barrier, like having a barrier. So if you ever have times between those things happening, like your ice armor and your mana barriers, sometimes you can one shot. So you want to try to get as much damage reduction as possible. You also want that percentage down below where it says you deal blank percent. For these pants, you see 17. While unstoppable, you want that as high as possible as well, because you're getting a multiplicative damage source from a pair of pants, which is super uncommon, and it does actually help quite a bit. So I recommend that. With the boots, you're going with Esu's Heirloom. The main thing you're focused on here is your critical strike damage and the percentage down below. Your crit strike chance is increased by blank. You want that. Honestly, I think that might be the most important thing. But if you get GA crit strike damage, and let's say it's like a 30%, like what I have, 30% isn't great. You want it to be at least 35% in my opinion. But if you get that GA to crit strike damage, you might be able to justify it like I am here. You know, it is what it is. We do what we do. And that's the main thing though. You want crit strike damage, and you want this because it's going to really help with your crit strike chance. Next, you're going to want to use either a sword or a dagger. Sword has critical strike damage. A dagger has damage to close. I prefer the sword just because you're already boosting your critical strike damage. So the more you get, the better. Then you're going to look for something with a GA on critical strike damage. Once again, aim for critical strike damage wherever you can get it. This build is somewhat similar to the lightning spear build, but you're just focusing more on frozen orb versus lightning spear, but like the bones of the build are very similar. Next, you're going to want to temper for chance for frozen orb projectiles to cast twice. That's your most important temper. And you want to hit all of your masterworkings on that temper. Critical strike damage is your next temper. That one's also important, but I would say you want to try to get your chance to cast frozen orb twice up as close to 100% as you can. It's super important for this build. And then it just increases the amount of conjurations you send out and the amount of frozen orbs that they cast out. And like you'll see in the background, like in the beginning of the video, I have gameplay playing through. I'll have some playing throughout this as well once we get done talking about the build. Next thing, look at Fractured Winter Glass. This is one of the most important items for this build to work. It probably is the most important item, to be honest, mainly because you're not going to get the huge amount of frozen orbs spawning over and over again without having this unique affix where casting frozen orb has a blank percent chance to spawn a random conjuration when it explodes. Your conjurations have up to a blank percent chance to launch a frozen orb at nearby enemies. And so these things work in tandem with you casting your frozen orbs and casting conjurations. Then you have your conjurations casting frozen orbs, and you have frozen orbs spawning conjurations. And so it just builds up, and then you have everything kind of going all in sync. This is the most important part of the build, in my opinion. And you want to hit conjuration mastery with your GA, preferably. And then on top of that, you want to hit it with all your masterworkings as well. Next, we have Talrash's Iridescent Loop. This one's awesome just because you get cooldown reduction. That's where you want to hit all of your masterworking. You want to hit all three on cooldown reduction. And then you also want to pay attention to the percentages down below. Those like unique affix percentages are really important for all of the items in this build. So pay attention to those, but you do want to get something with good cooldown reduction. But you want that 20%, as close to 20% as possible, and 80%, because that's just an extra damage source, and it does quite a bit of damage, so I recommend that. With your Ring of the Starless Skies, this one is kind of personal preference where you put the masterworking. You want the ring because it's going to help with your mana generation and help not feel like you're always struggling for mana. Where the masterworking goes is a personal preference. For me, I already have critical strike chance in a lot of places, and I feel like attack speed is really nice with this build. The more attack speed you can get, it really helps everything kind of come together and helps your mana generation, helps you get out more conjurations, and then increase your damage at the same time. You get what I mean? But if you're really struggling with critical strike chance, you can go for your critical strike chance masterworking. I recommend probably doing 2 on attack speed and 1 on critical strike chance, like you see here. That's what I would say is probably the best balance. Next, you have our focus. And our focus, you really want to get one with GA on cooldown reduction. You're going to be getting a lot of cooldown reduction from your Shaco, but any extra you can get from some of these items in between will also help out a lot. So you can just constantly be casting your conjurations. You can see my skill tree down below. I have our ultimate, Unstable Currents, Lightning Spear, Teleport, Ice Armor, Frozen Orb, and Ice Blades. I recommend keeping Lightning Spear and Ice Blades on your skill tree so you can cast them. Some people prefer putting like Flame Shield up here, or what is it? Yeah, Flame Shield, right? Some people prefer putting Flame Shield here instead of Lightning Spear or instead of Ice Blades. I think it's better to get as many conjurations out as possible, and once you have some of this end game gear, survivability isn't as big an issue. But with the focus, so you want to focus on that. With the focus, you want to focus on that cooldown reduction. You want to hit all of your masterworkings though on chance for frozen or projectiles to cast twice. Critical strike chance, cooldown reduction. Those are the 2 things you want to focus on. You really want to get your GA on cooldown reduction if you can, but they're hard to find. Vulnerable damage is a screw up. I need a better focus because it's so hard to get cooldown reduction GA to roll on these that I have just kept vulnerable damage. I was trying to roll critical strike damage, so I recommend critical strike damage there. And then on your sword, you also want to have the conceited aspect because that's gonna just help 25% boosted damage while you have a barrier, and you should have a barrier like majority of the time. For your focus, you should use Splintering Energy. I've gone back and forth with Splintering Energy and Storm Swell. If you're getting a lot of conjurations out, like if you just have things kind of flowing where you can get like 15 plus conjurations, I think that Splintering Energy is providing more damage than Storm Swell. But if you're struggling and you don't have the attack speed to get the cooldown to get your conjurations out quick enough, you might want to just go with Storm Swell here. For the gloves, you want the Frozen Orbit, where your frozen orbs explode 2 additional times at the destination for 60% of the damage. Now, I'm not going to go over the Paragon board. We'll put that down below in the build guide that I will have in the description. Go through that. Look at the Paragon board. You can always make adjustments. I typically take a Paragon board and take someone else's that they've already built and kind of work from there, because Paragon is a little bit daunting. It is something that sometimes you're just like, whoa, where do I go? How do I make sure I have enough points to get everything I need? So the Paragon board will be down below. If you're interested, look at that. And yeah, just watch some of the gameplay as we fade out. And I hope you had a good one. This is a really fun build. I enjoyed it a lot. It's one of my favorite builds in Diablo 4 so far, and this is like the S tier version of it. This is like what all of last season and all of this season has led to this build here, and now we finally have the season of the Sorc where this build can truly shine. So I'm just having the time of my life playing it. I played it on the PTR as well for season 6. I will upload another video with this same build, but in the PTR in the new season with the new Paragon board and the new glyphs and everything, and just kind of show you it's going to be pretty similar, but I wanted to separate the videos so that we can have one for this season, people who are still playing, who are just getting into it, want to try out a new fun build before the new season comes up. And yeah, thank you so much. If you guys have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comments below. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.